you have to do the work to find your voice. You have to kind of be conscious of, the feeling you're experiencing in the meeting or in the room, and try to say, okay, what is it? Is it because I'm not prepared? Is it because I am the only woman and I'm not comfortable? Is it because they're not making me comfortable, or is it because I'm making myself uncomfortable?
This is Boss Ladies. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'm here with Jenifer Herrmann, and I'm so excited. Thank you for taking the time to be on Boss Ladies today.
Olivia, it's a pleasure, and I'm thankful for the opportunity and look forward to a great conversation.
Me too. And so, can you start by just, telling us a little bit about yourself and your career journey that's led you to where you are today?
Absolutely. I have had a really fun journey, and I can't say that any of it was necessarily planned. I guess the first time I did plan something in my journey is right after college, where, forgive the old reference, but I actually turned the real pages of a print newspaper in the New York Times and found my first job out of the classified sections as a receptionist in a small toy ad agency that I had to take a typing test to make sure I was able to, properly type the amount of words on a memo that needed to go out. But it's probably the first time I specifically had a thought process of how to get a job. And after that, it came from natural conversations and interesting meetings and networking with people throughout my career. But yeah, I started as a receptionist or secretary at a small company in Lower Manhattan. That was a wonderful start to an amazing career.
Awesome. And tell us, so from that starting point as a secretary, what was your next step and how did you get it?
Yeah, one of the best counsels I give to people starting out is I loved working for a very, very small company, because at this agency, I got to be exposed to the production side of advertising, the account management side of advertising, the finance side of advertising, and the executives. I was in the rooms with the CEOs every day, because there was a total of 7 of us working at this company. And what drew me to advertising is I always liked the creative world, but I just never felt that I had a true creative bone in my body. So, the account partnership or account client and service work at ad agencies gave you the best of both worlds, being around this creative environment, but applying your kind of more strategic business background. So from that small agency, I met somebody who worked for Gray Advertising, a little small agency that some folks might have heard of. And we had a wonderful conversation. And the fact that I was exposed to so much in such a short time at the first agency really gave me a leg up, because, while I didn't come from a, well-known first a creative shop or agency, the fact that I knew so much about the day-to-day workings of a company really helped me get that job at Gray.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I stayed at Gray for a number of years. And, I was telling someone, a friend of mine the other day, after that first job, I never really looked for a job. I met people that were so interesting that I found myself saying, oh, I would actually like to work for you at X company. So I was never really looking to go to Gray. I found a very interesting conversation randomly happening with a woman who I'm still dear, dear friends with today. And she was my first boss at Gray. Her name is Nicole Ferry. And Nicole and I had a wonderful conversation. And I kind of said to her, can I come work for you? And that's how I got into Gray. And I weaved my way around a number of different clients within the Gray family of small and kind of subset agencies. And I spent about 5 or so years there. And then, quite frankly, I found myself in a really interesting conversation with a woman who worked for the WNBA at the time. And it was because I was doing some new business scouting for the division of Gray that I worked for. And I was at an event called Women in Sports and Events, or WISE. and I started talking to a woman named Jenifer at the WNBA. Once again, I found myself intrigued by, oh, I think I would like to go work for you. And I started a very long interview process at the NBA. And 4 to 6 months later, I landed a really, really exciting opportunity at the NBA again because of somebody I met and a great conversation we had at a random event.
I just want to quickly shout out to the concept of informal networking and how powerful that can be.
100%. It is. It's so powerful on a number of different levels. From my perspective, one, just the connectivity of like-minded people, especially if you're networking in a space that you have interest in. The reason why I joined Wise was twofold. Selfishly, I wanted to see if I could help my own passion for sports. I was a athlete growing up and in college, and I just was always interested in the business of sports. And then I also thought it could be a good business networking opportunity for Gray. And lo and behold, I met somebody. Well, I met many people. Jen is just one that stood out to me for this conversation. But I met a bunch of really impressive, motivational senior, in this case, female executives that just really put a new spotlight on other opportunities that exist in the world. So absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's amazing. And I think, it's obviously been hard in times of COVID to still continue that networking. But I always encourage, and other women on the show as well, we always talk about different ways to sort of continue that networking, even in the remote era, whether it's grabbing virtual coffee or if there's other ways to sort of find yourself connected to other people.
Yeah, and you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable part of it,
Hmm.
especially in the virtual space. I am also more recently a member of the Chief organization, and I became a member only in the virtual world. And you may or may not know, Chief is an organization that empowers, again, senior female executives to kind of connect with one another. So, one of their most compelling aspects is the meetups
Hmm.
and the networking. So, you have to pivot in times like we're in now to force yourself to outreach on your own and use that community board and say, hey, I read your profile. It's almost like online dating a little bit. Hey, I read your profile. Would you mind spending 15, 20 minutes with me? I'd love to learn more about you. And it's hard to do at first.
Yeah,
It really is. It's uncomfortable, but you get through that first one, you get through the second one, and then it's great. And then you hope someone reaches out to you so you can offer the same kind of counsel that you've been given.
totally. That's such an important point, is to always pay it back.
Oh, 100%. I find it, and I find it so not only powerful for your own journey, but it's the right thing to do. And I would not be where I was today if I didn't have a significant network of individuals around me that just did a solid for me, a
Hmm.
favor for me, and
Yeah,
put a call in for me or gave me counsel because I was nervous about an interview that I was going to go on. I mean, there's just nothing that I did alone.
no, me too, honestly. So I totally agree with that. So going back to career journey, you're at
Yep.
the NBA. What was
Yep.
that like, and how
Oh,
did you, get to Evergreen?
what's it? The NBA is that was my Harvard education. So I truly was. It was I was not someone who had the opportunity to go to graduate school, and that was I was at Gray. Excuse me, I was at the NBA for 4 years, and it was my master's education. I was there at the time where David Stern was the commissioner, and he ran an organization that was stellar with holding the bar very high for performance. I had some incredible bosses and mentors while I was there, incredible marketing partners. I worked in the global marketing partnership group, and that was essentially working with our global partners like Nike, Gatorade, Southwest, Anheuser-Busch,
Mhm.
and collaborating on ways that our two brand could could collectively raise awareness for one another and partner on key initiatives that would just create some really great opportunities for both of our organizations. And it was incredible. It was really, really hard work. It was really intimidating at times because the level of individuals and the type of thinking at that organization is stellar, continues to
Mm-hmm.
be. But at the same time, it was, again, if you are willing to put yourself out there and feel vulnerable and surround yourself, hopefully, by people that make it okay to fail forward, you could do a lot in 4 years. And I did. And I met a lot of tremendous people. But I think it's really where I grew up as an executive. I really got my, feet grounded at that organization, and it really set the stage for how I would deploy my skills moving forward. So it was a crucial time in my career path.
That's amazing. And honestly, I agree with what you've said. I'm always blown away by a lot of the decisions they make. I mean, even around setting up the bubble during COVID, I feel like
Yes.
they're definitely pioneers. So that's awesome.
I mean, the way that organization within my journey, I have to imagine there's a hundreds of organizations similar to them, but in my journey of career pathing and growing up, that organization opened my eyes to how to be nimble.
Mhm.
I mean, forgive the pun, but the number of things that were thrown at you at the NBA and how you had to pivot. And I was there during, and now I think there's a Netflix documentary on it, which was the melee at the Palace when there was that fight in the Palace of the Detroit, and I forget the other team, but I was there in moments that you need to move, you need to be on your feet,
Mhm.
and truly, we talk about the partner economy now, but it was truly one of the places too where I wasn't just a service vendor. I was a true partner, a collaborative partner with another big brand, right? So it wasn't just how does the NBA service Gatorade or how does the NBA service any of the other partners. It was how do our two brand equities help one another to get to where we want to go. So it was a
Mhm.
really, really cool place to work, and really intense and intimidating at times, but wonderful.
So what led you to Evergreen Trading?
Evergreen, yeah, I did, by the way, go back to Gray prior to going to Evergreen. I did love Gray so much that I went back. But Evergreen was interesting because, once again, I got a call from a friend of mine who was there that says, you have to meet this person. It wasn't about, of course, this is a great company, but you have to meet this person. That person's name was Mark Ordover, who's my current COO at Evergreen. And when I sat with Mark, and by the way, I thought, why would I leave Gray and the NBA and all these
Mhm.
great places to work for something called media investment, or at the time barter? Like, no way. This is not sexy enough for me. I'm not I'm not doing that. And thank God I didn't listen to myself, and I truly never try to say no to anything. But I took my friend's counsel and I met Mark, and we had a phenomenal hour and a half conversation about the creative world, that the fiscally creative world that
Mhm.
barter, which we now refer to as media investment, was. And I just had a ball talking to him. And I, for the first time, thought, this is an industry that I've never heard of before, and I am thrilled about. And let me see now, it's 2022 almost. I've been working with Mark, and then obviously the extended Evergreen family, for a very long time, and I hope it's a place that I stay for a very long time after that.
That's wonderful, and what a great career journey you've had, and excited to see, the wavelengths you continue to or the waves, I should say, you continue to make. So, a question for you. How has your experience as someone who has worked in a lot of different male-dominated spaces and industries contributed to sort of your overall goals and your overall approach to creating a diverse, inclusive, and equitable environment, at Evergreen and maybe in past roles as well?
Yeah. It's interesting. I have to say, I think I've been fortunate in two ways. One, even at the companies that may or be considered more male, or the industries that are more male dominant, I've never worked for any male executive who believed in a glass ceiling. So I've never had a male boss who I felt that I was held back by. So very, very fortunate in my journey. I know everybody else is not as fortunate, but I've only had, and maybe it's because, like I said, I don't look for companies, I look for people to work for. So I've been fortunate in that sense. Also, all of the companies that I've joined, from the NBA to Evergreen to Gray, there's always been really strong female representation from day one in my interviews too. So I've always felt like any company that I was going to join, based on that initial conversation, I would be surrounded by really strong female executives. So that's really my path on that side. Now, as a gay executive, as a woman, I came out in my probably in my early gray days, so when I was in my 20s. Again, I was very fortunate to. It was scary, I
Hmm.
think, I came out in when I worked for Gray in, I guess it was at the time, let's call it the late 90s, early 2000s. And then subsequently, when I went to other companies, I don't know that I consciously talked about my personal side in the interview stage, but I never, once I was part of the organization, I never shied away from the conversation. So again, I've been lucky. It's been a journey for my own self discovery. I did a lot of work on myself to
Hmm.
feel that comfortable. But I also, again, was fortunate enough to be surrounded by people and organizations that uh, two things didn't matter to them: the fact that I was a female or the fact that I was a gay female.
I like what you just said, that you did a lot of work on yourself in that self discovery and that journey. I mean, if you're comfortable sharing, what was some of that work that you did to feel more comfortable, and what helped you make the decision to, you know, talk about that? Because I mean, we both know Jennifer Brown, and she's been on the podcast, and she talks about the concept of bringing your full self to work,
Yeah.
and you really did. So can you share a little bit more about that experience?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, on a very personal level, I lost my father at a very young age. So there was a
Oh,
very,
I'm sorry.
yeah, thank you. There was, but it's part of the story because, I don't want anybody to feel bad. It's part of the story because I made a very conscious decision at an early age that if you don't live life to the fullest, you might never get an opportunity to live that. So
Yeah.
I had to do the work outside of any organization, and whether that's, one, maybe a little bit of therapy, to
Hmm.
kind of testing the ground with friends, getting comfortable with myself. And quite frankly, I didn't want to be, selfishly, I didn't want to be left out of any conversations. Like, if everybody else was coming in and talking about the fun stuff they did on the weekend, why couldn't I?
Hmm.
And I will also say there is something, and I still think I have residual effects of it as a 49, almost 50-year-old woman now, of imposter syndrome. I think living
Yeah.
a closeted life for a long time, even after you come out, and again, I came out almost 25 years ago, there are moments where you still feel insecure about, wait, where am I? Did I really make it? Am I really out? Am I really this? So
Hmm.
I'm not going to lie, there's are moments of imposter syndrome that still sneak in even to this day. Um, but yeah, the work I did on myself was a personal journey of getting outside counsel, surrounding myself with good friends, and quite frankly, taking risks that make me feel so uncomfortable, and forcing myself to do it to this day. Forcing myself. I was very scared to work for the NBA. I knew how demanding that organization was. And
Hmm.
it could have been enough. I was happy in my job. It could have been enough for me to not take it, to not take the risk and fail. But I thought, how could I do that? How can I not tell people, that I work for one of the greatest brands in the globe, on the globe? So
Yeah.
I still do things today that make my stomach queasy. I was teasing you before we started recording, like today, this moment, it could be one of them. Recording a podcast. So let's go, let's be vulnerable and full disclosure. I'm not my best self on these types of things, but I gotta get out there and try. So it's what one thing I can kind of provide counsel on is, you know, even after you've been through the ringer and gone through your own journey, there's still going to be moments late in your career that are going to make you uncomfortable and you're going to be scared. And that's good. That means you're never really relaxed.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, and I think you're doing an amazing job. I think the key honestly is being authentic and true, and you've been so vulnerable, which is amazing. I mean, this is I'm loving this conversation. I oftentimes when you're the only, insert demographic here, right? Blank in the room, either gender, race, sexuality, that can be really hard and really scary. So how do you approach these situations, and do you have any recommendations for listeners that are struggling with this?
Yeah, 100%. It's really about how you find your voice, and it's challenging. And by the way, it's not just, of course, it's gender and how you look in the room. It could also be seniority.
Mhm.
When I've grown up and been around all kinds of different levels, and you're still, even if you're on an executive team at a company, you might be intimidated because all of a sudden the board members come in. So it is, listen, it's a hard, it's hard counsel to give, because I think for the most part you just gotta kind of live through it. You have to learn how to trust your voice and trust your instincts. I remember, if I can digress for a second and tell a very quick story, but when I first joined, I think it was Evergreen. I worked for Mark Ordover and a couple of other places, the gentleman I referred to before. But, I remember starting brand new at the company, and it must have been like day number 4. And they chose to send me out on a big business pitch, new business pitch. And I said, well, what are you doing? I'm here 4 days. You're sending your rookie into the Super Bowl. And he said back to me, don't worry, I'm also sending my all pro, excuse the sports references, you can tell. So apologies for anybody who I'm losing right now on this, but essentially he said, I'm sending my all pro defensive team with you, so you can't fall. And so I guess what comes out of there is, when somebody tells you you can do something, believe them, because they often know more than you, especially if you're new in the game. So, I think, if I could, a long-winded way of trying to answer your question is, you have to do the work to find your voice. You have to kind of be conscious of, the feeling you're experiencing in the meeting or in the room, and try
Mhm.
to say, okay, what is it? Is it because I'm not prepared? Is it because I am the only woman and I'm not comfortable? Is it because they're not making me comfortable, or is it because I'm making myself uncomfortable? And you've got to start doing a little bit of an audit of,
Mhm.
what's happening, how you're feeling, and how you want to change it moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your earlier point, like imposter syndrome is so real, and it sounds like even what you just said of having someone, having a peer, having an ally just reaffirm that, you have all the qualifications, and you got to trust that. I think really
And
helps
being
combat that.
vulnerable is huge. like again, I'm lucky because I've surrounded myself in a work environment with people who I happen to trust, and
Mhm.
we've earned that trust over time. But I'll be vulnerable in front of before a big meeting, and say to either my boss or somebody who works next to me or for me, anybody, and say, I'm really nervous. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, this is where I'm not sure I can nail this point. Who else has a point of view? Maybe I switch up who handles this part of the presentation. Like, you've got to be okay with being vulnerable to every level around you, to say, no, I don't think I'm going to nail this one today. I need some help.
Mhm.
And it's huge. And being vulnerable, both with people who work with you and around you, and partners and clients and vendors. I mean, humanity is a powerful thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think vulnerability, I mean, so Brene Brown has that TED Talk on
Yeah.
vulnerability, and that is something that, has helped me a lot. And it's hard to be vulnerable, and it's scary to be vulnerable, but I think the thing that you're saying, and that she says as well, is just that it pays off, and it's so rewarding when you actually push yourself to be vulnerable.
Not only do I believe it's rewarding, I think it makes us stronger for the next time, because once you share that vulnerability, you probably are not going to be you're not going to feel as vulnerable the next time around. So you
Mhm.
just kind of start, you got to get over these little humps. And I'm saying it as if it's a walk in the park. It's not. It's really hard. You
Yeah.
know, work. I'll tell an embarrassing, vulnerable story. I was single for a very long time,
Mhm.
and someone reminded me that you're successful at other things because you work really, really, really hard at it. Every day you work really, really hard at being the best you can be as a
Mhm.
person, the best you can be as an individual, the best you could be, at work. And all of a sudden you just think a partner is going to pop in your life because you're hanging out and you're waiting for this. You're like, you got to work for it.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
good.
true.
That's a good point.
I mean, for anybody single out there, trust me, I didn't meet my soulmate until I was 40, let's see, 43. So it took me a little while.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you have to work on it. Meaning, the number of first dates that I went on that were so bad because I didn't show up well, because I was intimidated, because I was scared, because I was silly. You
Yeah.
work on it, and then you find yourself open enough and vulnerable enough to actually meet somebody that you never thought in a million years you'd get to meet, or work for an organization like Evergreen or like the NBA or like Gray that you never thought you'd have the opportunity to work at. Like, that's what vulnerability does. It
Yeah.
gives you this wonderful pot at the end of the rainbow that you really honestly didn't know exist. I could have never mapped out that I was going to work for the NBA. I could have never mapped out that I was going to work for a great company called Evergreen Trading, which now is an ESOP company. Evergreen just sold all of the company to its employees. So how phenomenal is that? I am now an owner. I would have never thought in a million years that I'd become an employee owner. So these are things you can't necessarily map out, but you can be willing, open, and vulnerable enough to take the experience.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing is that if I don't put any work into my dating life, I'm
No,
never going to meet
you're done. You
they
don't
won't
even
just
call me.
magically find
You
me.
are not gonna do not stop watching the rom-coms. It's not gonna happen. You got to do the work, and then something magical will happen. That I can promise you. If you do the work, it will happen.
I love that so much. And I love how you've sort of no, I love how you've talked about vulnerability across different areas and how it's about putting in that time, being open and being vulnerable in all the different areas of your
Yeah,
life.
yeah. It's not easy to do good things. That's If it was easy, everybody would do it, right? So it's not easy.
Very, very true. So, I think a lot of these experiences can be very challenging on our mental health. And I think especially this past year and a half has been even more challenging than we ever could have imagined. So I did want to talk a little bit about mental health. I mean, you had mentioned therapy earlier on. I'm in therapy. I love therapy. And is there anything else that you recommend that's been helpful for you with regards to mental health to sort of help you stay balanced with all these challenges?
Yeah, well, I'm a huge advocate for exercise and physical health, which I
Mhm.
think is absolutely, and I know science backs it, is connected. So I am an avid runner. Not long, I did run. While I did run the marathon, I'll never do that again. But I
That's
probably,
amazing.
yeah, it was a bucket list thing. It was great. Talk about practice and preparation, my gosh. But yeah, so I ran the marathon. I believe it was 2009. With great experience, but don't need to do it again. But I do still run every day. My daily runs are more, closely aligned to 4 miles than 26.2 miles. But yeah, so I get out. I'm an early riser, so now that I live with that wonderful partner I talked about before, we're in Manhattan, where I'm actually in Brooklyn, so we're in a small space. So my morning routine is mine, and I think it's very important to have your own silent time to think and reflect. So every morning I get up between 5 and 5:30 and I go for a run, and there are some days where I work out in the gym and I lift a little bit. So a constant and steady physical routine for me is paramount.
Mhm.
I get ideas when I run. I get ideas when I'm kind of on my own, even if it's still with a cup of coffee in the dark with nothing going on yet. It's just paramount for me to have a reset in the morning. A lot of
Mhm.
people do that at night. My partner's more of a night owl. She's a creative designer and a painter. So she's a little bit different in how she kind of spends her day. So her time away from me and a way for her to be creative is at night when I'm well sleeping for hours. So that kind of moment to think, reflect, ideate, be creative in your own way. My creativity is maybe how I can present a story in a PowerPoint versus how I could, paint a wonderful canvas. But
Yeah.
I think for me, I know, and my partner will even say, "Oh, you didn't run today, did you?" Because I'm more impatient, agitated, and kind of frustrated. So a
Mhm.
physical, and I'm an avid skier as well and a golfer. So I also look for activities outside that I could be with other people and compete and play and have fun. So I'm always staying active.
That's awesome, and I like that you spoke to sort of how your partner, balances mental health as well, because it's true that it's different for everyone, but I agree, honestly, I hadn't been exercising a lot during the pandemic, and I was an athlete in college and before college, and, it just recently I started getting really back into it again, and it's been a game changer. I
I
mean, the fact
know.
that I even stopped, it's day and night.
It truly is, and yeah, physical, consequences aside, it's for me. It's so much more tied into how I feel emotionally when I'm running or when I'm skiing or when I'm golfing, and the whether or not I have stronger legs or a smaller size. That's a consequence. The
Mhm.
the bigger benefit to me is how it makes me feel emotionally, and how my attitude is, and how I approach the day. And I'm someone who needs to do that first thing in the morning. And I love it. I love the time by myself.
Totally. I mean, honestly, I come back from a run now and I'm like smiling and happy, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm happy about. But it's just all those endorphins. So I definitely second that.
Oh, yes.
So if you could go back and tell your younger self who was just getting started with her career something, what would that be?
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. To trust your gut more, to listen to your voice. It took me a very long time to recognize that my instincts were pretty good.
Mhm.
And it may sound cliche, and it may come with experience. You can't really trust your gut until you have a couple wins under your belt, etc. But I think even at a young age, if you have good instincts. And thankfully, it's because instincts are not necessarily anything you learn. You
Mhm.
sharpen them because you're around different circumstances. But I've always had a good ability to read the room, to have good instincts, but I never trusted my voice
Mhm.
soon enough. And it took a lot of people over a long time to convince me that I should trust my voice. So I wish I could have done that a little bit earlier.
I think that's great advice, and hopefully anyone early on in their career listening and takes it now, and really
and
trust your gut and your voice.
and don't be a hero. Like, take people's help. I mean,
Mhm.
it's if someone helps you get into an organization or cracks the door for you, they're not getting you the job. They're giving you an at bat. Everybody could take any help necessary to get the at bat. You just got to
Mhm.
break through. So I was my one of my best friends growing up. Her daughter was looking for an internship, and she didn't want anybody to help her. And I thought, oh, that's silly. Let us help you. We're
Yeah.
not going to get you the job. We're going to get you the shop.
Yeah.
But I get it. She was she goes to a phenomenal college, and she wanted to do it on her own. But there is no loss of pride in having someone help you out. I do it every day. I look for help.
My last question for you, which I ask in every episode, it's my favorite thing to ask, is what is one of your greatest accomplishments?
Well, as a joke, I'm going to say finally getting a wonderful partner in my life at 43 years old.
Woo!
Woohoo! Um, I'll tell you, one of my greatest accomplishments is really loving. I'm sorry if this sounds cheesy. I loved every organization I've worked for. I never made a bad company choice. And again, I think it goes back because I chose people over company. And I
Mhm.
chose to work for places that I met the people first. And I just, while some opportunities were shorter than others, I never look back and say, boy, that company was a bad pivot. I just was really, really, I pride myself in saying yes to opportunities that I thought I would never in a million years either be in front of because I've never heard of the opportunity or imagine that I could be a part of like an MBA. So I fancy myself a little prideful on being able to navigate a really fun and interesting career that not only I'm proud of, but my family's kind of proud of too, which is really nice because I love my family and they mean a lot to me.
That is an amazing answer and an amazing note to end on. Thank you so much for being on this podcast.
It's been such a pleasure. And thank you again for inviting me on. It's been a blast.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Boss Ladies. Check back next week for a new episode. Visit us at www.bossladiespodcast.com for more information about the show, or follow us at Boss Ladies Podcast on Instagram. Rate, like, and follow the show on all of your favorite podcast platforms.